Hey everybody, this is Mitch Drury, Logical Libertarian here, and we're on again. It's 9:13 Pacific, so I'm a little later than I wanted to be, but eventually I'll get there. I've got some stuff I've been taking care of, so today we're going to talk about preferences, sexual preferences, and how it relates to the concept of gender and sex, and a little bit about that topic too. We'll be doing a review of another Riley Dennis video, which is the one on preferences and are they discriminatory, in which not only does she talk about sexual preferences towards those with different gender identification, but also she talks about racial preferences as well. And I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, but we're mostly going to focus on the sexual preferences towards gender identity. That's going to be the main issue. But let's jump into it. Alright, well, of course, always be checking the chat, seeing if anyone wants to jump in. Not everybody does, obviously, but here we go. Yep, there we go. It's still gone. Alright, so something I want to kind of identify first is something that's called sexual attraction. Now, sexual attraction is something that happens in any species that reproduce sexually. Mammals are a very big part of that. They have sexual attraction, and a lot of times when there is differentiated sex between the and there's typically only two genders. There's only two sexes per species. For those that produce sexually, there is gender, typically sexual dimorphism, in which case there are certain secondary sexual characteristics, one that are unique to that sex of that species. And those characteristics are what the other sex will use to judge whether or not they're attractive or appealing, whether or not they want to mate with them. This is anything from, let's say, with humans, breast size, muscle mass, even things like height, complexion, subtle things such as smell. Typically, men and women, or just anyone who's attracted to someone, the smell of someone they're very much attracted to, oftentimes, even if it's not sexually arousing, is stimulating. Things like that. When it comes to other animals, like birds and reptiles, maybe certain dances they do, there's rituals to sex. It's very interesting to study the sexual habits of animals. Not like a pornographic way, but just the rituals of it, the things that are done, how mates are selected. And it's a big drive of sexual selection, which many species today attribute some of their survival, maybe a lot of their survival, to sexual selection, as well as other things, of course. But it's a big part of it. And that also kind of applies to the whole gender thing, too, about being male when it comes to gender and gender roles. But we'll get to that another time. So that's what sexual attraction is. But it's based mostly on the concept of the desire to mate, to perform sex. The act of using sex organs, together. That's what it's about. Now, sexuality is essentially, it's your, a lot of people kind of, your sexuality is maybe how sexual you feel, or your personal kinks too, that kind of thing. But another big thing is it's used as sexual orientation. And sexual orientation is what you are attracted to for sex. And this is where I get an issue with one sexual identity, which is pansexual. And the definition states that it's not limited to biological choice, gender, or gender identity, which to me completely takes the term sexual out of it. Because gender identity is argued that it has nothing to do with genitalia. but it has everything to do with personal choice, personal preference, subjective interpretation of one's feelings and thoughts. So that's what gender identity is seen as. It's how it's defined. Gender itself is kind of more ambiguous. Sometimes people use gender loosely to mean the more modern liberal arts version of gender identity, or they use it as a synonymous term with sex, where it describes the secondary sexual characteristics, the social and cultural aspect of male and female. And then sex, obviously, is male or female, and those are the only two. There are occasionally hermaphrodites, but again, those are they are typically people who have both genitalia or aspects of both sexes, and oftentimes they kind of choose one or the other. They don't always, but they do. Now, the only thing that pansexual does offer any credence to, where I do kind of give it the respect of its namesake, is that essentially, because someone who's bisexual is attracted to, I guess you could look at it this way. The one way that I do understand pansexual is if you look at it through this lens. Heterosexual means you're attracted to the opposite sex with the opposite sex's genitalia. Bisexual means that you're attracted to the same sex and the opposite sex, but only the same sex with the same genitalia and the opposite sex with the opposite genitalia. And homosexual means you're attracted to the same sex with the same genitalia. What that would mean is that pansexual may go beyond that and state that they're okay with people who are of the same sex with the opposite genitalia and of the opposite sex with the same genitalia. If that's what it is, because they include intersex, which honestly, most often that it would be trans, those who are pre-op trans. And when I mean trans, I mean those with gender dysphoria who are actually transitioning, not non-binary. And then they're attracted to, like I said, hermaphrodites, those who are born with both, which are very rare cases, but I can understand that. And I guess to that extent, people who are open, there are probably plenty of heterosexuals who are open, which would mean that they're sort of a pansexual version of a heterosexual, that they're okay with dating a trans person, and would be supportive of their transition, but that they're still going to be a little freaked out by that, and they would appreciate honesty beforehand. But that's the only thing, and that would mean that too, that you could apply pansexual to a heterosexual version, which means that you would need to come up with a heterosexual version of that, or you could use pan to describe beforehand. So you could be pan hetero, pan homo, pan bi. You know what I mean? Which means that you have to open up the language, and then if you're pan bi, that means you're what the modern definition of pansexual, meaning pansexual is completely different. But of course, that's beside the point. I think it's a little interesting that they never included that concept, that there are possibly straight men that are okay with supporting trans women going through transition, that there are straight women that are possibly would be supportive of trans men going through transition, and then bisexual men or women that would be supportive of either one. That's possible. I'm pretty sure a lot of guys would be like, okay, I'll be with a girl that's got a dick, but she's got to have a smaller dick than me. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of guys that would make that joke. But that aside, then of course we have bisexual, as I explained, sexually attracted to both women and men, to both sexes. And that's what it is. And sexuality isn't always necessarily based off gender identity, because gender is, like I said, it's subjective. What someone sees as gender roles, another person may not. Plenty of couples, you ask just ask any heterosexual couple what the pants mean, what the male or female roles are in society. They're gonna differ. They're not even gonna agree entirely, and then they're not gonna agree with you. They're gonna have differences. It's all subjective. It's not at all. There's a little bit of cultural influence, but very little. Most of it is what we know from our parents and what we want to see ourselves. Now, going over all of that, one little tidbit I want to go over before we touch on the video has to do with this, just to kind of offer some, I guess, to kind of run a test against logical clarity. Now, the person we're going to be watching identifies as a feminist, and they agree with the concepts of consent. So, the feminist position on consent. Problem with how we've defined consent. Consent is not so simple. The problem, I'm going to say with consent is not so simple. It's only from about a year and a half ago. Probably a little bit better. Consent is not so simple for our culture. It's not simple. For me, it's not simple. It's not simple in my psyche or my heart or my spirit. It's complexity, how consent and agency work. I claim my right to hold some parts of my story close to the chest. There are parts of the story I hold. Holding parts of my story in darkness is my right. This is part of having sexual agency. Okay, I guess. Sexuality does not fit into boxes. Sexuality is messy. Sexuality lives in the shadows. Alright, you know what? We're not going to read that. That's a little dead. Let's go to feminist definition. Definition of consent. So that yes means yes, and why that you think why you think what may be consensual is rape. What is consensual? Common law states that if two adults willingly agree, simple right, not. Consensual sex, I found many definitions. Since what constitutes lack of consent? Hardly anything. What consensual sex isn't. So yes has come to mean if the other person doesn't say no violently or screaming, it's okay. The problem with this definition is that it reduces the power of the second person involved. If the person is ready to go and the other person is frozen with fear and says no in a small voice, it's still rape. Okay. Even though many women freeze with being violently sexually violated, which is a strong defensive mechanism as fight or flight. What is consensual sex really? It's time to rediscover it. Both parties agree to it, ideally verbally, but at least physically. Both parties show excitement and willingness to have sex. Look for visual clues. Just ask and watch. Of course, this means ask and watch if they say yes. Marital sex where one person doesn't have sex. Drunken and intoxicated, one person is incapacitated or cannot consent. Sex where a person says no, but they had consensual sex before and been labeled a slut. Their no is discounted. Sex with a minor. Or one drives consent midway. Of course, but a lot of times, I guess I'm having trouble finding it, but I've heard many times that coercion is considered rape. Essentially, talking someone into doing it. Like they say, like, oh, but don't you love me? Oh, but don't you do that? And if they begrudgingly say yes, if they say no, and then you try to convince them, and they begrudgingly say yes, then technically it's considered rape. It's not consensual. So we'll take that into consideration when we watch this.
Would you date someone who's trans? Would you date
I've answered that question.
someone who's black?
Yes, I have.
Would you date someone who's fat?
Technically, my fiance is, yes.
Would you date someone who's disabled? Now, honestly,
Yes, I would.
I don't know what your answer is.
I think I have technically, I don't know.
To those questions, but I've met a surprising number of people who would say no to all or at least some of them. Their argument is that it's just a preference and that you can't control who you're attracted to. I think most of the time that
Okay, now that's true. You cannot control who you're attracted to.
this is brought up, it's in regards to race. I'll link to a couple really good videos in the description about.
And it's true too. Many people are going to be attracted to the same race. Some of it, I think, and this is speculation, I think some of that has to do with the fact that I really think that we were I think we were speciating a bit, separating ourselves out like that. We have such drastic differences in race. It's annoying that we do, but I think it explains a lot. Just various things in both health risks, height, weight, muscle density averages, everything you could look up. And I think it also kind of explains some of our tribalism with our own race as we started to develop some speciation ideas with it. And you notice that it was all regional too. Southeast Asian, they all have similar looks. Middle East all have similar looks. Africa all have similar looks. The North Americans all had similar looks. The South Americans all had similar looks. And Europe all had similar looks. And even then, Europe was kind of diversifying too between Mediterranean climates and, I guess you could say, the more northern climates, like in the Nordic regions or even in the UK. So there's definitely there's an argument for that happening. I'd say we had thousands of years of kind of just staying in this similar gene pool, and then of course colonization happened, and that got undone. We're still the same species, and we crossbred, whatever you want to say, interracial relations, and I think we're better off for it. But I would say that many people who are attracted to what they're used to seeing and what they see in the mirror, I think that's a big thing. A lot of times that's what it is. If someone grows up in an area where they usually see white only, they're probably going to be attracted only to white people. If they see many different races, then they're going to be more open to different ideas. Some people might find certain races more attractive than others. They might be willing to date anybody, but they find Asians or Hispanics to be more attractive. Maybe they're just features that are stereotypical of that race that they find better. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not necessarily fetishizing either. It's just sexual preference. You cannot control it. And the argument that you cannot control it is the very same argument that, and it's legitimate, that we use for actual sexual orientation: heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual. So you're already kind of treading lightly, and considering you're in LGBT,
about racial dating preferences, but in this video, I want to talk about our other biases. Let's start with trans people. Would you date a trans person?
yeah, like I already kind of gave that. I would support someone in transition. Yeah, I would date them knowing that that's what's going to happen, and being supportive and going through it with them, and you work it out. You work it out.
Honestly, think about it for a second. Okay, got your answer? Well, if you said no, I'm sorry, but that's pretty discriminatory. Now,
well, yes, it is discriminatory. That's what sex is. That's how we are. Like I explained, we are a sexually reproductive species. So, and with that comes the concept of sexual selection. We are going to be sexually discriminatory. Okay, ask a woman, would you date someone who's fat? Would you date someone who's shorter than you? Well, that's discriminatory against fat and short people. It's not their fault, necessarily. Fat people, kind of, but some, what's the definition of fat? You have about people who are a little bit heavy, but, work a hard job and stay fit, but just can't get over that, can't lose that extra 10 to 20 pounds that makes them between a little overweight and having a six-pack. You know what I mean? Like, you're trying to turn this into being bigoted, but you don't understand the concept. And there's a difference between someone who legitimately just is disgusted by trans people, who would never talk to them, who would, want to wash their hands after shaking the hands of a trans person, those type of bigots. And someone who's just like, no, I'm not attracted to that. When I date a man or a woman, I want them to have, a penis or a vagina. That's a big part of it. Maybe you don't have the secondary sexual characteristics they're looking for. And a lot of times, many trans people don't. Why, especially when you have, like, trans people who very much hold on to their original secondary sexual characteristics, like trans women that have beards. That's not going to attract too many males or too many lesbians. It's not going to. You're not going to attract that because they're not looking for someone with a beard. It's the wrong secondary sexual characteristic. Biologically, that's what we're looking for. And I don't think you understand that. That's why people, though, like, say, Blair White, are considered what is quote-unquote passable. And what that means is that they have gone through therapy, they use makeup and other things. They have done the work to give themselves secondary sexual characteristics that match what they're transitioning to. And that's a part of the therapy for gender dysphoria. It doesn't always work. Sometimes dysphoria is just too fucking rough, hence you have suicide. But that's a part of it. That's a big part of it. It helps them cope with it. It helps them find people. And it helps them convince them in the mirror, yes, I'm now what I want to be. I'm now what I should be. Because they can see the secondary sexual characteristics. It's obvious to them. It should be fucking obvious. But it's not. And it goes from everything. From voice. Men typically have deeper voices. Women have typically higher voices. To kind of hip-shoulder ratio and hip-waist ratio. To, hair, eyes. No offense, Riley, but Adam's apple. Things like that. That's what makes that. And it's hard, I understand. It's not easy to change those things. Sometimes you start too late. Sometimes you just can't, but you work on it. And, like, obviously, Riley, you've lessened up your muscle mass. You've made yourself seem more feminine. Why? Because you know those are secondary sexual characteristics of a female. You understand that. How come you don't understand that here? And then the biggest thing is, sorry, but many straight men and lesbian women are not looking for a penis on a woman. They're looking for a vagina. That's a big part of what they're attracted to. That's a big part of their sexual experience when it comes to that moment. Same with straight women and gay men. They want a penis. It's what they're attracted to. Like... And then bisexual, sometimes they want boobs with a vagina. They want, the big ripped biceps with a penis. Sometimes it's just how it is. You can't help it. You can't. It's discriminatory, but it's not bigoted. Discrimination isn't always through ignorance and bigotry. You have to understand that. They're not, bigotry and discrimination are not interchangeable. They can be exclusive.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you're a horrible person who hates trans people. There was
You're about to, actually.
probably a time in my life when I said I wouldn't date a trans person.
But you've evolved and grown, of course. Or no, you've started to transition, so now you're different.
Since then, I've thought critically about it and changed my mind. I could sit here and show you photos of conventionally attractive trans people. There are definitely trans people who you would never know are trans unless they told you, because they pass for cis. And that might convince some of you. But I think arguing that you would only like a trans person if you didn't know they were trans is a...
Actually, no, it's not that way. A lot of people would be okay with dating a trans person if they were upfront and honest, and they would be very, very impressed. It would be actually a pretty good way of winning someone over. When you're like, yeah, but this is the work I've done. I was born biologically female. I started taking hormones when I was 16. I got surgery to remove my breasts and to alter my body when I was 19. And I've been working at the gym, taking hormones to bulk up. I now have some cool facial hair. I've gotten some rocket muscles. And they're like, wow, that is amazing. And they become impressed with them. And that amazement is a part of just regular attraction and would add to sexual attraction. And it's because they have the secondary sexual characteristics. That's what it is. That's how it is. It's not, and that's the thing, is not knowing is the biggest killer. Not knowing and then getting home and finding what you weren't expecting is the killer. And I imagine that is extremely emotionally damaging for both parties. One feeling lied to and the other feeling extremely rejected. And I can understand that. That's horrible. That's why you want to be upfront and honest as early as possible. And you don't have to awkwardly put it in. Try to learn how to put it into conversation. When talking about it. When you think, oh, we might go home. Just say, hey, just so you know, I'm a trans person. And you talk about it. And you can discuss it. And maybe they'll be like, you know what? Yeah, sure. Let's go and fool around a little bit. They may not have sex with you, but maybe they'll do something. You don't know. You don't know. But you have to be honest about it. And be prepared for rejection. We get rejected all the time. It's how we grow as a species. Most of the people you try and hook up with reject you. It's just life.
Poor argument. I think you could be attracted to any trans person, whether they pass or not. I think...
And most of the skeptic community is attracted to Blair White.
The main concern that people have in regards to dating a trans person is that they won't have the genitals that they expect. Because we associate penises with men and vaginas with women...
No, it's not necessarily that. But it is, but it isn't. It's also because when you're gay, you like being fucked in the ass by a dick, and you like sucking a dick, and you don't like a vagina. Vaginas just don't do it for you. And then when you are a lesbian woman, you're looking for a vagina, not a penis. You're looking for a pair of breasts. That's what you want. And then the same goes for the heterosexuals with lesbians, and the straight women with gay men. Like, you got... He's like, you don't understand.
Some people think they could never date a trans man with a vagina or a trans woman with a penis. And
some people can't. That's okay. Though, think about it this way, more for the people who are willing to do that. And you should be happy that there are people out there that are willing to do that. And it's harder to find. I know, you're kind of in a conundrum there, but that's just how it is. It's unfortunate, but that's life.
I think that people are more than their genitals. I think that you could feel attraction to someone without knowing what's between their legs.
Well, yeah, you can. That's friendship, platonic attraction, and some people might have romantic attraction to you. But the big thing, if they're not willing to have sex with you, that's going to be an issue if you get into a romantic relationship. Because if someone's not going to fuck you, you're going to feel rejected. You're going to feel not good enough. And you don't want someone to fuck you who doesn't want to fuck you, because it's not the same. You don't want it to be a pity fuck or anything like that. It's not the same. And as we've discussed, someone having sex with you out of guilt or begrudgingly is not necessarily consent. At least not by feminist standard. So think of it this way, Riley. If you kind of guilt a lesbian, a heterosexual cis lesbian into having sex with you, have you raped her? Considering that you were originally biologically male, does that make you a male rapist? Like, think about it. Like, you're writing yourself into a corner here.
If you were to say that you're only attracted to people with vaginas or people with penises, it really feels like you're reducing people just to their genitals.
When it comes to sex, yes, because guess what we use for sex? Our sexual organs.
Kind of objectifying them, but you're...
No, you're not objectifying them. That's what you're sexually attracted to.
You're thinking of them more as genitals than objects, so
No. You don't get it. You can't give a blowjob to a vagina and you can't eat out a dick. Okay? Plain and simple.
I guess you're kind of genitalifying them? Anyway, my point is, we have implicit biases that we were raised with or that we developed.
And this is another thing that I hate about social justice and shit. They always try and say, oh, we have a bias, things that we were raised with, things that we put in our heads. No, it's biological. This is biological. This has nothing to do with society. You're going to see this no matter where you go. No matter what culture you're in. If they're looking to be with a woman, they're expecting an entire woman. Okay? Be glad that you're in a country that the worst that's going to happen, unless you run into a psycho, but the worst that's going to happen with a normal person is, oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't Maybe they'll be mean about it. Like rude, like, get away from me, you fucking freak. That'd be it. That's the worst. Unless they're a fucking psycho. In which case, there's nothing you could do. Psycho's just hard. But in many countries, if they discovered that, you'd be killed. You'd be put in prison. Beaten. Okay? Rejection is gonna happen, Riley. That's how life is. I mean, when you were male, you should have learned... You learned that, maybe, right? Men get rejected all the time. Women get rejected a fair amount, too, now. That's just how life is. You get rejected. It isn't reducing you to anything. It isn't based on any internalized things we've been taught. It's how life is, okay? Look for people. Here's the thing. If someone doesn't want to date you, don't worry about them. They're not worth your time. If they're not interested in you, why even care? Look for people who are interested in you. And if you're interested in them. It's consensual. It's got to be mutual. You're both interested in each other, there you go. You're set. Like, quit focusing on people who have no bearing on your life.
Over time, and they can be hard to get rid of. And I think this can be especially prominent within the queer community. Gay men often pride themselves on being disgusted by vaginas, and the same goes for lesbian women with penises. It's difficult.
Now you're trying to, like... And you should understand that. You should understand that, yeah, they're just like, no, I'm not turned on by a vagina at all. I'm not turned on by a penis. That's your answer right there. That's the clue that you are just completely looking over and rather taking offense to it instead of understanding that's what it means. Because here's the thing, Riley. Hardcore religious nutjobs have been trying to convince gays that they should be attracted to vaginas for centuries. And they've been doing the same to lesbians with penises for centuries. Using things such as radical as shock therapy and abuse. Like, I don't think you see that. And this is one thing I cannot get over. And this is kind of the theme of this week. Possibly the theme of this month. Regressives, you guys have become... You're becoming the very thing you hate. You have adopted so many principles of the old, you know, the really hardcore conservatives, the bigoted conservatives of last century, the Jim Crow supporting KKK, you know, if you don't believe in Jesus the right way, you should be murdered types. You are adopting the same principles, but under the guise of this pseudo-egalitarianism. You're supporting segregation. You're supporting systematic racism in the ways of harming white people to benefit people of color. You're supporting systematic sexism, a matriarchal system that attacks men to support women. And now you're trying to convince gay people and lesbians that they should be straight. Do you not see it? How? Fuck. And you wonder why so many, like, liberals are running away from the Democrat Party, are running away from the regressive movement. Why? You wonder why Milo Yiannopoulos and Blair White are, like, Republican. It's because the communities that should be supporting them have now turned against them because they think a little differently and because they are themselves. You're hating them essentially for being themselves. But it's not, you know, that bigoted kill you hate. It's that passive aggressive progressive hate. You know, that sarcastic sigh with your arms folded and rolling your eyes kind of hate. But it still comes with all the dangers of using the state to push your ideas. Fuck.
Difficult because some queer people have built their sexual identities on these repulsions, but I don't think they're innate at all.
No, most of them build their sexual identities off of what they like. I've not met a gay man who's just like, I'm gay, that means I don't like vagina. Maybe if they're joking or making a joke, yeah, sure. Or if they're called out, like some woman's just like, you're hitting on me, and they'll be like, hun, I'm gay. That's what they'll do. That's it. That has been it. Like, it's never been. It's always more, like, every experience I've had with a gay guy has always just been, they're a guy, and then we talk about, oh yeah, that woman's hot. Yeah, well, I think Joe's hot. Oh, okay, cool. That's how it is. They're not defined by what they aren't. They're defined by what they are, which is gay, which is that they like men. Oh well, so what? They don't want to sleep with a trans man who has a vagina. Who cares?
If you met someone who was extremely attractive, had a great personality, but didn't have the genitals that you wanted, you might be surprised to find that it isn't a deal breaker. As someone who is...
It isn't always a deal breaker, but it depends on the person. If you're going out to a bar looking for a one-night stand, that is a deal breaker. But if you meet in a coffee shop and you're talking, and then it comes up that they're trans, and they get to know you more, then it may or may not be, but it still might be, because that is a big part of our relationships. It is a large need. As you can see, we have a whole fucking community set around sexual needs. LGBT. And it's mostly the LGB that's about that. That is based around them having sexual needs that don't match the majority. They're considered a group of that, but that's what they are. Their sexual needs are fulfilled by the same sex, and then one group is fulfilled by either sex, but it also depends on a few different things. And you just don't realize that. It's why we masturbate so much. It's why porn's so popular, because sexual gratification, feeling sexual pleasure, and then feeling not only sexually satisfied, but feeling like we can satisfy sexually, is an important thing to human psychology. It is an important thing to a healthy human. You don't get it. You don't get it.
Trans and gay, sometimes people ask me with a very accusatory tone if I would date a girl with a penis. Because there's this stereotype that trans lesbians are just predatory cis men creeping on cis women. But the thing is...
That almost sounds like something the old trans people feminists would say. And then the question then comes, if you push a woman, a lesbian, to date you, to have sex with you, and you're like, oh, well, you must be transphobic, and if she's a feminist lesbian, and she's into, not only just a feminist, but an intersectional feminist, and it's like, well, I don't want to be seen as transphobic, have you technically raped her by feminist standards?
Is I absolutely could be attracted to a woman with a penis.
You could be, okay. So... you would be that pansexual version of being a lesbian then. But I'm assuming you're only attracted to women. And I bet you your attraction more has to do with that. And I mean, you gotta realize too, you don't get it. You just don't get it.
Attracted to any woman, cis or trans. If I find you attractive, I don't care what you have down there. But we know that sexual orientations are more innate than learned. They're more nature and less nurture. Gay conversion therapy has been proven not to work. But
you knew that was going to come up. But you didn't understand that you don't see the issue. Because you see it as prejudices. It's not prejudices. It is them. They have a sexual attraction to men and men only. That's it. Just deal with it. Don't try and convert them to something else. Let them be. Quit trying to browbeat them into your ideas, into your lifestyle, okay? Let them be them. You do you. You're not harming anyone when you do you. But you are when you're suggesting these ideas and pushing them more and more. Okay? Especially when things like C16 in Canada come out. That's not good. And that could lead to the potential of what if that... Let's let the slippery slope happen, because if C16 can come out of Canada, a law about rejecting trans people and probably rejecting women could come out too as being an act of violence. rejection is an act of violence. Now you are forcing people to have sex, or else they go to prison. That is a rape culture. I don't think you understand how idiotic, ignorant, and dangerous your line of thinking is. Okay? It's not a far leap.
Takes time and conscious effort. And the way that we talk about potentially dating trans people has a lot in common with the way we discuss other preferences. Saying that you're not attracted to fat people isn't innate. It's informed by a society.
Actually, saying you're not attracted to fat people is typically informed by the fact that you are looking for a healthy mate. It's the same that goes with disabled. The fat and disabled thing are actually related. If we see that someone is injured, we don't want to have sex with them because we don't know if that injury is genetic, and also we don't want to waste time having sex with them while predators picking them off. That's essentially what that is. Fat goes for the same thing. They're unhealthy, so we don't necessarily want to do that. Now, there's a difference between being, when I say fat, overeat or don't starve faster. There's a lot that goes into that, and so that's how that is. Also, women usually having a little bit more fat is, you know what I mean? Like, like I said, there's a window. There's a certain window and gap. There's a spectrum, and there's a bell curve within the spectrum that a lot of people fall into, and that's typically the standard of attraction. There are a lot of people who are attracted to women who are obese, or even certain body types within being obese. There's a man who's attracted to big girls is still gonna maybe not be attracted to certain obesities and not be attracted to certain fitness. And it goes the same the other way. Men who are attracted to really thin women might be attracted to really thin women, not to anorexic women, and not to women who are maybe, seen as a little bit bigger than curvy. They almost might be too big for them. It doesn't mean that person's fat. Even if that person says, "Oh, they're too fat for me," it doesn't necessarily mean that person is fat. It just means that they're out of their preference. That's fine. Disabled, it's unfair, but a lot of times people who stay with people who are disabled, or people who date people disabled, do so out of an understanding or out of a long time of being with them. Like me, my fiance, if she were to get into a car wreck and not be able to move her entire life, she gets paralyzed from the waist down, I'm still going to be with her. We've put that time in. We've done that. I've proposed marriage to her. Like, obviously I'm going to stay with her. However, also the question would be, would I date a disabled person? Well, yeah, probably. I don't see why not. I'm sure I could find a ton of beauty and romantic and sexual fulfillment with a blind person, a deaf person, anything like that. A deaf person, I'd have to learn sign language, which would be a challenge. It might be harder than for a blind person, but a blind person wouldn't be able to understand visual art. But I play music. The blind person might love me playing music, and that might be a way we connect, and it's beautiful. It's awesome. There's so many different ways to do that. Someone who is paralyzed from the waist down, I could have maybe an attraction to, but you got to realize, well, yeah, I could. I think I was. You can. And it depends on what disabilities are you talking about. And that's the other thing, too, is a lot of people are given disabilities, a lot of psychological disabilities, and they're fine. But the lack of attraction towards it is based on what I described. Again, it goes back to the sexual, and that's more of a natural selection type of sexual selection. But it still falls under that, and you just don't understand that. I thought liberals were supposed to be all about science, but you push the non-binary thing, so science isn't really your friend.
Society that tells you that being thin is ideal. Everything.
No, it's not society that tells you being thin is ideal. It's our biological nature of seeking healthy sexual partners that tells us that being fit is ideal. Fit, not thin, fit. Thin is not necessarily seen as ideal.
And the media you consume is bombarding you with messages that skinny is beautiful and fat is ugly. And even
Oh my gosh. Stop it. You're like the trans Alex Jones.
the nicest of people absorb these messages to some degree. But again, if you find someone attractive and really enjoy spending time with them, there's no reason why their weight should be a factor. Especially
Here's something to let you know. I think, personally, you're a little too thin. for me. Is that because society pushed it on me? No, it's because you look a little too thin for me. Oh well.
Especially since we know that the relationship between weight and health is extremely complex, and you really can't make any moral judgments on a person based on their weight. And lastly,
you can't make a moral judgment based on their weight. I mean, you could make an assumption, but that assumption could be wrong.
let's talk about disabled people. Disabilities come in a very wide range, from being deaf to being in a wheelchair to only having one arm, and I think it's pretty ridiculous to say that you couldn't be attracted to any person who has any of those disabilities. Disabilities can happen to anyone. Someone you're extremely attracted to today could become disabled tomorrow, and that shouldn't make your attraction to them disappear. Though if it does, it might not be because of them, but rather because you have some preconceived ideas about disabled people that are just...
Maybe it's not the preconceived ideas about disabled people. Maybe it's because they don't want to have to put up with that disability. Now, that's unfortunate and kind of cruel and very cold-hearted, but it's not because they think disabled people will have any issues or whatever. It's because they understand what that means for that relationship. If someone's in a wheelchair, it changes how your relationship is and things you can do. When someone's in a wheelchair and you date them to a certain point, you essentially become partially their caretaker. And the question is, do you want to do that? And there are plenty of people who are in wheelchairs who can take care of themselves, but there's certain things they just can't do. They might need help with. You have to understand that. You have to understand that. Same with being blind and deaf. There's just certain things. There's certain things that people might be like, oh, I could date a blind person. Oh, no, I love visual art. I could never share that with them. Maybe that's a thing. It's kind of petty and stupid, and I think you could work your ways around it. But oh well. Don't try and tell them what they're thinking. Oh, it's because you have preconceived ideas. No, it's because they understand it's a challenge, and maybe they don't want to deal with that challenge.
Just inaccurate and harmful. Unsurprisingly, this is another case of the media telling you that a certain group isn't attractive. Disabled people are rarely romantic leads. Their stories in movies and TV shows are often tragic, but that doesn't...
Well, disabled people are a very small portion, and I can give you a disabled, not only romantic lead, but a disabled hero. Daredevil. Matt Murdock. Blind. Not technically, but he still is blind. He can use sound to see, sort of, but he still is blind. And he's a superhero.
Reflect the reality that disabled people can be happy and have dating lives and be attractive. Now, if you're not attracted to someone, you're not attracted to them. I'm not going to tell you that you have to be attracted to this fat person or that trans person.
Yeah, but you're telling them that if they aren't, that they are inherently and subconsciously judging them and being, that they have this negative opinion, that they're being bigoted. That's what you're doing, and it's a form of coercion. It's a guilt coercion. It's stupid, really stupid.
Or that disabled person. But the more you work at unlearning your own prejudices, the more you'll be able to see people from these groups as people rather than tired stereotypes.
Well, that's the thing, is some people just aren't attracted to that, but they don't see them as tired stereotypes. Maybe they actually understand, oh, a fat person, well, I'm not attracted to a fat person. Why? Because I'm just not. Maybe it just doesn't get to them. They're not attracted to someone in a wheelchair. Oh, well. Maybe it's in the wheelchair. Maybe the person just doesn't have the secondary sexual characteristics that raises sexual attraction. Oh well. Maybe they don't have the same likes and dislikes. You are prejudging people based on their rejections for sexual partners. In asserting so many claims about them. You're making so many accusations about them with no evidence, with no backing, and all you're saying is, well, the media puts these ideas in our heads. Prove it.
Learning our own biases doesn't happen overnight, and I don't have a step-by-step instruction guide for you. But I think...
Well, that's helpful. That's fucking helpful. And this is another thing, too. This goes back to that. This is something I've noticed a lot with the progressives, is that they like to call out, they like to announce these claims about people. They like to give very vague reasoning, like, well, the media does it, it's society, it's our culture. They can't give you evidence, they just say it, and they pull a few things, but as I've proved last live stream yesterday, it's not always the case. When you look at the evidence, oh, actually, no, you're not making a good point. You're kind of wrong. And then they say, oh, well, I don't have an answer. Or when they do have an answer, it's very vague and stupid and requires self-hatred and self-destructive action to do anything. No. And this is why so many people reject these ideas. Because they're stupid. They are poorly thought out. They have no logical basis. There is no evidence for it. And you have no fucking solution.
I think if you can accept that these prejudices exist in all of us, even you can identify them when they come up and work to change how you think about them.
What if it doesn't exist in me, though? You're saying they do in everybody, but I say no. I don't have these prejudices.
Most likely be a long, slow process, but I think it's worth it. Because these dating...
Again, this sounds so much like it goes back to the religious thing. You sound like people are just like, oh, well... This is why so many atheists reject progressivism too, because they've heard all of these from Muslims and Christians and Hindus that like, oh well, if you're faulted, you're wrong, inherently at fault, you're inherently bad. But if you just take the time to accept Jesus or Muhammad or Krishna or whatever, and look inside yourself and do a lot of deep thinking, and you just keep working at it and keep praying or going to synagogue or whatever, you're eventually gonna see the light. You're talking to us like we're fucking children, and you're giving us it's stupid. It's not a solution. Oh, well, if you realize you have the bias and you work to unwork it, then you'll be fine. Okay, so you're saying to have an acquired taste, and this is what you're proposing essentially. Oh, you're a gay man not attracted to trans men. Trans women who haven't completed transition. Trans men who still have a vagina. You're essentially telling them that they need to force themselves to have an acquired taste to pre-op trans men. And that the reason they should do this is because they have inherent biases from society, from the media and culture that we consume. And that's why they have this they don't have this taste for it. You have no idea how fucking retarded that sounds, how ignorant that sounds, how cult-like that sounds, how just fucking... When you boil down all the buzzwords and all of the fake claims in that, when you boil all that out, this is what you have in the end. And it is stupid, it is repulsive, it is regressive, it is ignorant.
Preferences are ultimately harmful to people who don't fit into your box of what a conventionally attractive person looks like.
Okay, tell that to every woman who's ever rejected me. Do it. Tell it to every single woman who's rejected me. That their rejection to me is harmful because I don't fit into their box. I'm not tall enough. I don't have the income. I don't have the abs. I don't have the facial structure. I don't have the muscle mass that they want. Maybe it's a personality thing. Maybe I'm not the douchebag that they want, I don't have that hyper alphaness that isn't even really an alpha, but you know what I mean, that like, oh yeah babe, that I'm not bro-y enough. There's so much that goes into that you can't just label it one thing. And when you apply your logic to other situations, you see how fucking stupid it is. It isn't harmful. It isn't harmful. The most it does is has someone feel rejected. And that's what everybody feels. Learn that you're going to be rejected in life. And if you're different, if you are introverted, overweight, underweight, there are things that are going to make you be rejected more. That's just how it is. That's life. You get rejected. How do you handle rejection? You don't tell people that they need to like you. Instead, you either find ways to make yourself less rejectable, as well as you just keep going on. You keep going on. You improve. You build yourself up. You make yourself happy with you. And don't, like I said, don't worry about what other people think of you. Worry about what you think of yourself. And don't base what you think of yourself on what other people think. Because that's essentially what you're getting at. Your self-worth, you determine by what other people think of you. By other people rejecting you or accepting you. That's not what it is. Your self-worth is based off of your own opinion of yourself. And you need to work on that. You need to sit down and think about what you like, what you want out of yourself, what you expect of yourself, and then start working towards those goals. Not about like anything else, but what you expect of just you, that just you can do. Then I think you'll start feeling a lot better and stop thinking these crazy fucking ideas.
Makes people feel isolated, alone, and unwanted to hear that they're universally unattractive to people. I don't think...
Universally unattracted to people? I didn't know that one rejection means that you're universally unattracted to people. I didn't know that 20 rejections... And people deal with that all the time. There are plenty of women and men I know who are not unattractive, who are attractive, who are decent looking, who just have trouble finding someone that likes them or have trouble finding someone who's going to stay in a serious relationship with them. There are people who are afraid of commitment. There are people who just don't know how to date. There are people who are in just different stages of their lives. You seem to just be completely clueless to all this and have no understanding, and instead talking to people like they're children and pretending that anyone who ever isn't rejected has no problem, or anyone who isn't the groups you're talking about never gets rejected. Like, you don't understand. You're going to be rejected by like 90% of the people you ever try and seek anything with. That's just how it is. You want to find someone who likes you? Find a friend. See if a friend's sexually attracted to you. That's actually the best fucking route to go. There's a solution for you. Fucking dumbass.
If there's anyone out there who somebody doesn't find attractive. We're sold this image of the conventionally attractive person, but in reality, all kinds of people around the world are constantly dating, having sex, finding people attractive, getting married. It's not only the conventionally attractive who find love or have sex. So by working on ourselves to dispel that idea...
So because you're saying that all kinds of people can do that, then you really have no problem. You are finding a problem where there is none. You are making a mountain out of a pebble. Not even an anthill or a molehill. A little pebble that just isn't even causing any issue. You're making a fucking mountain out of that. It's people get rejected. That's part of life. That's how we learn and move on. Okay? Your rapey mentality doesn't work.
We can make the world a more welcoming and loving place for everybody, no matter...
For everybody. Everybody will find someone. And if they don't, oh well. Okay? It's sad. That's just how it is. That's human nature. Sometimes you can't find someone because of the area you're living in. Maybe that means you need to move. It doesn't mean you need to force people around you to start liking you. Move to a bigger city. Move to an area that's a little more open-minded. If you're gay and trying to find love in a fucking hick town in Texas, you're not going to have much success. Move to Dallas. You'll find it.
Matter how they look. This video is a part of my Feminism with Riley series that I'm doing in collaboration with...
Which is so fucking ironic because...
Everyday Feminism, a website dedicated to helping you stand up to and break down everyday oppression. Be sure to give this video a...
Everyday oppression. Oh, no, fuck.
You need a website.
Would you date...
So yeah, that's that. Let's see, anyone watching the thing? Nope. But yeah, that's that's that. And I just don't get it. I don't get how these liberals can push these concepts and believe that they're actually helping people. Because they're not. They're not helping anybody. They're not doing anything. All they are doing is pushing very stupid ideas, very radical and extreme ideas, and saying that it's a good answer. They're pushing ideas that are the same in principle, not in idea. They're the same in structure and in what would be required to do it. To the bigoted and hateful ideas of the past. And they don't understand that. They don't see that. And when you call them on it, they say, oh no, you're just wrong, or no, well, it can't be that way. You have a point, but it can't be that way because I have oppression points. because I'm black, because I'm a woman, because I'm trans, because I'm gay, because I'm, this. Well, no. Bigotry is bigotry. Bigotry is based on the concept of hatred and violence and aggression towards people based on ignorance and superficial traits, and a lot of times misunderstanding. That's what it is. It's not who's doing it to who. It's the fact that it's being done. That's what makes it bigotry. Bigotry doesn't require a white person to a black person. It requires the action in the middle. And that's the real issue here. And yeah. But when it comes to the preferences, you don't seem to understand. You don't understand. What is it? Rally 2 doesn't realize that there's that one. This thing. Does she not accept pansexual as a preference? Because pansexual is someone whose sexual preference is not limited to that. So she would be looking for pansexual people. Pansexual women is what she wants. Not bisexual women, not lesbian women, pansexual women. And that's the whole part of the argument. Her whole basis of discussion is as if pansexual doesn't exist, or that she's pushing for everyone to be pansexual. And I think there's a push for that. Now, I noticed not long ago, a while back, some friends of mine who were very, in that spectrum, on the regressive side, they went to it was like a Christian Christian LBT thing or whatever. Liberal Christians going to work with LGBT people, to become allies in that. Most of those people came back saying they were pansexual. People who were not even bisexual, saying they were pansexual because they pretty much just because they were willing to date someone who was trans. Now, does that make you pansexual? And I've asked people that. Does that make me pansexual if I'd be willing to date a trans woman? I'm heterosexual. I would only date a trans woman. I would not date a trans man. I would not date a man. I would only date a cis woman or a trans woman. Does that make me pansexual? And they say no. That it makes me heterosexual, that I'm just open-minded. So there's obviously a very great difference between that. And I think people are trying to force sexual orientations onto others. Now, some of these people may have realized, hey, I am into this. I'm bisexual and would be willing to date trans people. Which is what I think that means. You're bisexual and you're an open-minded bisexual person. If I'm an open-minded heterosexual, then pansexual doesn't exist. You're just an open-minded bisexual. And that's it. Pushing these ideas and making people accept identities that don't necessarily fit them, but making it a political identity, doing it for political purposes, to spread sort of an idea, to spread a message, is a big issue for me. Because these people don't necessarily agree with this, but they are pushing an acquired taste. It's kind of like the fake it till you make it thing. And it does make me very concerned, because these people are suppressing their actual ideas, and I feel that they're suppressing any logical rejection to these ideas merely to not be perceived as ignorant or bigoted. And that is frightening. Because this is being done in universities. These are people that are my age. Because I'm a millennial. 25 years old. I'm young. Very young. Most people I watch on YouTube who do this sort of stuff are easily 5 to 10 years older than I am. If not more. Like Thunderfoot, But a lot of these people are a good 5 to 7 years older than me. They're out of the millennial range. They grew up, they had a chance to learn about MTV before it became shit, which I did too, but They didn't grow up. They grew up pre-grunge. I grew up grunge. It's a good way to actually define a millennial. And it's tough to see. And it's tough to see the next generation, my sister's generation, go through this. My brother's, 4 years younger than me. He's kind of towards the bottom of the end of the millennials. My sister's the start of the next generation after that. She's 10 years younger than I am. It's sad to see this. And to see people having their reasoning and logical capacity suppressed for the sake of fitting in politically. And again, it reminds me a lot of a cult. It reminds me a lot of religion. How people are told to just fake it till you make it, to shut up and believe. Don't question. But instead of questioning makes God or Allah or Krishna or Buddha or whoever, the flying spaghetti monster, fucking Xenu, makes them upset. And it means that if you question, you will not get the heaven reward, or if you question, you'll receive the damnation punishment. This time it's being ostracized as being hateful. It's losing your friends because they believe that you having your own mental agency and saying, wait a minute, means that you're somehow hateful of people. No. Not at all. Our capacity to question is a survival instinct. That's what makes us think, oh no, that bush might have a tiger. Best run away. Let me think about it. Did the bush have a tiger last time? Question, when you go to grab a branch, that branch looks like it's moving. Might be a snake. These berries are red. Last time I saw someone eat red berries, they died. Instead of just going along and not thinking. You're suppressing those basic instincts. You're suppressing what makes us human, which is our thought process, our ability to think abstract. And it's annoying. But not only that, you're also demanding us to suppress our inner nature. Sexual orientation, sexuality is very, very subconscious and very innate. It's not something you can just change on a whim. But to expect to like that, to expect people to change their sexual orientation through sort of a self-therapy of, I'm not a bigot, I'm not a bigot, I'm not a bigot, I'm not a bigot, is not healthy, and it is very, very much not genuine. You're not going to be attracted to these people when you do that. Okay? You're making these people change massive things about them, and maybe even question who they are. You're making them throw away their unique identity to become part of this sort of conglomerate communion that, what's the point? If everyone is the same in outcome and the same in thought, and differences don't matter, then what's the point? Is it diverse? Because there's a difference between seeing everyone as equal and not caring about differences. Noticing but not caring. And making it as if those differences that are major are inconsequential. Someone being black is important. They may be liable for certain health risks. I have to buy certain suntan lotion, possibly. You know what I mean? Being white is important. You need to buy more suntan lotion. Other health risks. Being gay matters. That's how we know, okay, you're not going to be attracted to that woman. I don't have to worry about you sleeping with my wife. You're gay. But if you say, well, maybe he can be attracted to a man with a vagina, okay, well then what makes him gay? Because a man with a vagina for many parts, it's also going to have many still other feminine characteristics. What if he discovers he does like women? Well, now he's bisexual. Possibly. His identity has changed. And for some, it may be good. Maybe they will discover more about themselves. But for others, you're forcing them to do something they don't like, they don't agree with, and everything inside them is screaming against it. And it's not because they have these preconceived notions about other people. It's because this is their nature. We've proven this is their nature. And now you're going against it. Just after we've proven that gender dysphoria is a thing, that someone can be trans because there are differences between the brain structure, the brain mapping of male and female brains. Now you're saying that gender doesn't exist and it's a social construct and non-binary exists. You're completely shitting on the scientific breakthroughs we've made to actually have feet on the ground to stand up for people who have been getting shit on. And now you're tossing it aside. And I just can't stand it. It's annoying, it's upsetting, but I'm going to continue to fight it. This has been your Lateral Libertarian. Thank you for joining me. It is 10:26 and we are fucking out of here.